but as Europeans.
Thank you, Fraser, and thanks everyone for the interest in the summit and EU-Russia relations. Now, EU-Russia summits are a regular occurrence. We have them every 6 months. In fact, over the next 7 months, we will have 3 summit-like meetings with 2 summits and 1 visit of the college to Moscow. So there's no shortage of possibilities to talk to the Russian government. What makes the summit special in a way is that it will be the first summit with new President Putin here in Brussels. We had met him already in St. Petersburg just a few days after his taking office again in his position as president. If we look back at what we have achieved over the last year and what might be the possibilities for this one, I should say, first of all, that we had the big cake already at the last EU-Russia summit here in Brussels. At that time, we were able to finalize quite a number of long-standing negotiations on WTO accession of Russia, which then formally happened on the 22nd of August, on an agreement on Siberian overflights, which was also a long-standing problem in our relations, and on a joint, how should I say, agreement, we call it common steps, which describes what both sides need to do and to finalize in order to be able to launch negotiations on visa-free travel. So all of these were quite substantial deliverables, and we are now in a phase where we have to look at, first of all, implementation of those. And we've noted that with some of these commitments, one of the 2 partners is a bit behind the schedule. And in this context, I don't believe it's the EU. So we have to address that and talk to the Russian side about what we can do to stay on track on those. On visa facilitation and on the common steps, this process on being able to launch negotiations on visa-free travel, I'm sure that's very high on the Russian agenda, and we will talk about where we stand and what is the way forward here. But I must say that a lot has happened in that regard over the last few months. So this summit will be one of looking at implementation and ensuring that what we agree is actually happening. And then secondly, there will be a number of useful agreements, not spectacular ones, not on the same range as the ones from last year, but useful in their own right. We will relaunch discussions on cooperation between GLONASS and Galileo, and we have agreed on cooperation in civilian protection, which is a very important topic. We will announce the Year of Science between the EU and Russia, which means a lot of activities to promote and engage European and Russian scientists. We generally want to promote work on scientific cooperation, but also going further in education and university cooperation, etc. So these are quite useful, and then there's a few of the other ones, but these are all quite useful steps in their own right, and they are normally below the public radar screen, but they underline the breadth of the relationship. But we also need to talk about the big topics on foreign policy. As usual with big partners, there's a mixed picture. There are some areas where we in fact cooperate quite well, and we may want to highlight 1 or 2 of those, but there are also areas where we could do better. And so issues like Syria will be on the agenda, and we'll talk generally about developments in the Middle East. We'll talk perhaps about Iran and the neighborhood. where do we move forward with this relationship? I mean, my take on this is that we have to move away from a kind of a transactional approach in EU-Russia relations, where we just agree on isolated items and topics here and there. We have to put this on a proper foundation, a proper basis. And in fact, we are working on this. The new agreement is supposed to be that basis, to give a structure to our relationship, to tackle all the different aspects, from institutional ones to issues of substance. And we'll have to see whether we will be able to inject a new momentum in that discussion with the Russian side. I think it is high time that we make progress on this. It is held back, and I think we discussed this already at one stage here. In fact, in this office here, it is high time that we will be able to agree on a substantive trade and investment chapter. This is important for Russia, and this is important for us. And after all, Russia is our third biggest trading partner, and we are by far the number one for Russia. So, I mean, this only underlines that there's a lot to be done. We will also talk about human rights and the rule of law. There's no, I think, secret here that the EU has been following developments in Russia with a degree of concern, and we've been on the record of this. The High Representative has published statements on the various laws and regulations that came out. And I think we've been very clear about the problems that we see with those regulations, not only for the space and sort of the activities of civil society, which up to a point also affects programs that we are having in Russia, but also because it undermines Russia's own modernization agenda. If you want to have a policy on fighting corruption in a more successful way, you need the early warning system of a functioning civil society, and you need cooperation of organizations like Transparency International and others. It is in fact necessary in a way that modern societies operate to include stakeholders, and that is civil society. I think with that I stop here to give others a chance to compliment.